Joining me now to discuss is Texas gubernatorial candidate and author of Hold Texas, Hold the Nation, Lieutenant Colonel Allen West. Colonel, welcome back. These military advisors' statements are at odds with Biden's. Someone is lying here. Biden was talking to ABC and the generals were under oath. Where do you land on this, Colonel?
Well, it's good to be with you, Chris. And first of all, I can say this. I just came back from a funeral service to bury a former classmate of mine at University of Tennessee, also a veteran. And it's sad to me that we have veterans still taking their lives in the United States of America when we're allowing tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants to come in and get taxpayer-funded benefits. So I want us to start focusing on our veterans, the people who serve this great nation, and make sure that we don't just continue to allow people to come in here illegally. Now, when you look at what happened up there on Capitol Hill in relation to the words that we just saw, it is very disconcerting, because there's one thing that we need to have from our senior military leaders. They need to be able to put their stars on the table and say that I cannot support you in this policy, especially when we know that it ended up in the loss of life of 13 of our brave troops over there in Kabul, Afghanistan, who were put in a horrific situation. So I think that if these generals had acted a different way and reacted in a different way, we maybe would not have seen the debacle that we saw, as General Milley said, a strategic failure.
That's a great point, because Mr. Milley also signed, by not standing up to Biden, also signed on to Biden leaving our people behind. And I didn't think real Americans did that. I wanted to get you to weigh in on General Milley, his refusal to resign. Take a listen.
It would be an incredible act of political defiance for a commissioned officer to just resign because my advice is not taken. This country doesn't want generals figuring out what orders we are going to accept and do or not. That's not our job. Just from a personal standpoint, my dad didn't get a choice to resign at Iwo Jima, and those kids that are at Abbey Gate, they don't get a choice to resign. And I'm not going to turn my back on them. I'm not going to resign. They can't resign, so I'm not going to resign.
Good grief. Mr. West, what's your reaction to Milley wrapping himself in the unnecessary deaths of our service members, deaths that he signed on to when he executed orders of a man like Biden, a man who has been wrong on every major foreign policy decision in the last half century?
Well, that's the whole point. He did turn his back on those men and women in uniform that he is supposed to stand up for as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. When the decision was made to completely turn over Bagram, he should have stood up. When the decision was made to put our troops in an untenable position there at Kabul International Airport, he should have stood up. And I spent 2.5 years in Afghanistan. I can tell you that was a horrible operational and tactical decision that he obviously went along with. When you look at someone that has stood up and has said that I am resigning my commission in the United States Marine Corps, the lieutenant colonel who now has found himself put into the brig. And so I think that General Milley is talking out of both sides of his mouth. And we really want to see those military leaders that stand up and say that we're not going to allow this to happen to our men and women in uniform. They are trusting those senior military leaders, to include General Lloyd Austin, who I served with at Fort Bragg back when he was just a full colonel and a brigade commander. They are turning their backs on our men and women in uniform, and that's why you saw the lieutenant colonel in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, speak out against them.
Let's bring it back to yours and my beloved Texas. Disastrous policies have also triggered a crisis at the southern border. Mr. Biden continues to violate the Supreme Court order to reinstate the Remain in Mexico policy, a policy that was already negotiated under President Trump. But Biden's administration is claiming they need Mexico to agree to accept these illegal aliens. Does that pass the smell test with you?
No, it does not pass the smell test, because this was an agreement. This was a policy that was already in place. So therefore, Mexico had already agreed with it. It's very ironic that, Joe Biden can come in and say that everything that happened in Afghanistan was President Trump's fault because he had already gone into this agreement. But yet when we have an agreement with Mexico, he can violate that agreement and open up our borders. What Joe Biden and his administration is doing is completely unconstitutional by implementing an open borders policy by executive order. And what he is doing, telling the Customs and Border Patrol and ICE to not uphold the rule of law and undermining the sovereignty of the great state of Texas. And I got to tell you, that's the primary reason why I'm running to be the next governor of Texas, because we need to have strong leadership at the state level that does not allow this onerous and intrusive nature of the Biden administration to topple Texas.
Took me right where I wanted to go. If you were in the governor's mansion facing a lawless left-wing government with mounting crises from the border to the China virus to inflation. How would you combat it? Give me a real short list here of what your top priorities would be.
Well, you stand upon the rule of law, and first and foremost, a good leader sees the battle before it comes, and he wins the battle before it even happens. So if it had been Joe Biden getting sworn in, I would have done everything possible to block any of the policies that he would try to implement, like we said, with this open borders policy. And so we would take those duties and responsibility, constitutional duties that he has abdicated. When you look at what is happening with this virus, I would not be mandating our Texas National Guard to be getting a shot in the arm because I'm the commander-in-chief of the Texas National Guard, but yet that's what we see happening here in the state of Texas. I would protect our employees, the Texans, here from private businesses that want to terminate their employment based upon this shot, because no one should be able to control your body but yourself.
Colonel Allen West, sir, I appreciate the time as always here on the Salcedo Show. Come back soon.